So you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, but you're not sure what kind of activities you really want to do, or you don't know what to land on. I'm going to give you 3 tips to help you figure that out. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, it's Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and raise money for their new nonprofits. I'm going to give you 3 tips in this video to figure out how to decide what services you want to provide. There are people who contact me all the time and they're like, Tiffany, I have a heart and a passion for this because this was my personal experience. But I also want to do this, and this. And sometimes it's a list of like 7 different things. And most people acknowledge that that's probably a little bit too much. So they ask for advice on like, how do I pick? How do I know what to focus on? So I want to give you 3 tips or 3 things you can use to figure out how to make that decision for yourself. I want you to also to watch to the end because I'm going to give you just a piece of advice about how to approach developing your programs and your services when you're super new. If you want to hear inspiring stories from other startup founders, make sure you subscribe to my Nonprofit Activator podcast. I am linking it below. So I'm going to give you 3 questions you need to ask yourself when you're trying to decide which direction to go. The first question is, do we have the capacity to do this work? Now, the word capacity, I'm using it in a broad way. So capacity could mean experience doing the work or the infrastructure or the potential infrastructure to do the work. So let's break this down. If you want to provide a service, ask yourself, have I done this before? How long have I been in this field? Am I aware of all the different nuances of doing this work? Do I know it in a deep way that I could literally start from scratch and design a program to be effective? Because it's one thing to do a program, but it's another thing to be effective. And to be effective, you need to have some kind of experience or be able to attract the talent that can help you execute in a way to be effective and produce good outcomes for the people or the things that you're serving. How deeply do you know the issue? Have you done the research? Have you taken the time to figure out what it really takes to do this work and to do it well? And one thing that people do in the very beginning is they'll volunteer for other organizations because they want to see the work up front. Now, there are some people who will start nonprofits because they've done the work. Maybe they're a teacher and they know what kids need, so they start an after school program. Or maybe they're a barber and they're like, I just want to make sure I get free haircuts for kids all over. Well, you know all the ins and outs of cutting hair. You may not know the ins and outs of running a nonprofit, but you know the hair business, right? And so you're starting a nonprofit because you have deep knowledge of that and you have a deep perspective. I really encourage you to design programs around areas where you have a different or a deeper knowledge and a perspective, because that's going to help you when it's time to start messaging your unique factor and start messaging what you bring that's different to whatever industry that you're in or the community that you live in. And here's another thing I want you to keep in mind, that even if you've delivered the service, so maybe like you've been in social services and you've carried out the work, it's different to actually lead and manage the work. So that's another thing that you need to think about in terms of your capacity. Do you have the capacity to execute the management of the work? Because you start a nonprofit, you're probably going to be doing a lot of the direct day-to-day work. But as you start to grow and get bigger, you're going to have to manage other people or run a whole program, not just worry about the one-on-one client interfacing that you normally do if you've been like a caseworker or someone who's done the work like a teacher or something like that. So just keep that in mind, that it's not just about providing the direct services, but it's about the management of it all. It's about the coordination of it all, because you're literally, again, starting from scratch. So I did mention this before, but I do have a nonprofit business bundle. It's a bundle of 3 workbooks to help you plan out your nonprofit. And it helps you to make decisions about how to start, where you should go. It lists out activities you should do before you decide to start the paperwork for a nonprofit, so you're prepared as possible. If you want a link to that bundle, just comment bundle below and I'll send you that link. The second question, is there really a need? And this is a really big question. And I've covered this in other videos. I'm linking one above where I talked about it. But ask yourself, am I doing this work because I want to do it? I have a burning desire to address something that is missing in me? Or do I really want to do this work because I see other people need the service and they're not getting it? And sometimes the answer is yes to both of those, right? The answer is, yeah, I have a burning desire and a passion for this work, but also there's a huge need. That's why I have a passion. But I do come across people sometimes who are like, well, I always wanted to have a nonprofit and I just want to pick something so I can help somebody. And if that's where you're starting from, I really recommend you slow down a little bit and figure out what is the real need in the community you're trying to serve. The first thing you got to understand is, who are you serving? Who's the target of your service? What's their typical profile? What are they struggling with? What do they need most? And the best thing you can do in this situation is ask them directly. The worst thing you can do is assume that you know all the answers and that your ideas are only the best ideas, especially if you haven't talked to the people who are going to be directly impacted by your services. So you may make assumptions about how you want to carry out work, but it may not be what the people need. Here's a really quick example. You want to provide food to people in your local area, but you feel really strongly about organic food. So you want an organic food bank, right? And you want to serve a particular population or a particular neighborhood that doesn't have access to organic food. And you start providing services and the people are rejecting the food, or they come once and they never come back again. And the question is, did they even need that, or did they even want that? Was that actually what's needed? Maybe they want money, or maybe they want access to buy their own organic food, or maybe they want the choice to decide whether or not they believe in organic food, right? These are just examples. I'm not saying that this really happened, but it's just a way for you to understand that you may not always have the solution. You may have a part of the solution and you may have some ideas, but you should always vet them by the people who are going to be impacted by the programs that you're providing. You also want to check out research. Look at the data. What do the data or the research say about what works best with the problem that you want to address? Because there are probably people who have been doing the same kind of work or similar work for a long time. And people regularly provide lessons they learn, especially if they go through program evaluation or there's some kind of research study on the program. In those studies, they often detail what they learned, what worked, and what didn't. And you can absolutely learn from that as well, especially if your program is similar to that. So if you're trying to figure out like what to focus on, talk to the people who are in need. Talk to the people who you're trying to serve, because they can help you narrow down on what you should be doing. Because in your head, you may be like, oh, I need to do all this, this, and this. And after talking to people, it may just be this one thing that they really need. Or you start here. This is really what we need. All this stuff would be nice, but it really at the core of our need is this thing. Right? And if you provide that service, you'll be way more effective. Why? Because people told you what they need. So just make sure you're doing your research and your background about the real need that you want to address, and make sure when you're making decisions about what programs you want to pick, that there are actual programs that are suggesting that there's a need. You may have a whole list of services for different types of people, because I encountered that too, where people are like, well, I want to help the homeless, and then I also want to help veterans, and then I also have a soft spot for kids. But in doing your research, you may see that there's enough programs for kids in your area. Or doing your research, you may see that there are enough organizations that have a lock on, the type of work supporting veterans. And your work may not be needed. It may or may not. I don't know. But unless you do that research, you won't know. So just make sure you do the work to research and see what really is needed in your community. And as I mentioned before, my business bundle gives you a process to do that. It gives you direction and questions to ask yourself as you're designing your programs. And if you want that bundle, again, just comment bundle below. Last question, is there a public will for this work? Have you asked yourself, do people have a desire to do this work, or do people understand the need for this work? Now, this one is a little tricky, because here's the thing. Even if people don't understand that there's a need, part of your job as a nonprofit founder and as you fundraise and ask for money is to educate people about that need. Because sometimes there's a need out there and people don't get it, right? People don't know that there are homeless folks that need a certain type of clothing, right? And so you're educating them about that so they can become mobilized and support you in that work. But sometimes if people don't understand the issue, it's going to take a lot longer for you to explain to people in order to get support. It's going to delay your startup because you're going to spend a lot of time educating and communicating people that they may not understand the issue. Or sometimes there's an issue that not enough people presumably care about, or the way you're presenting to them, they don't necessarily care about. And so it may be harder for you to get people to support you because it's not something that's top of mind for them, or it's not something that they immediately go to, right? I'm just going to be honest. Most people, when they think about nonprofits, they associate it with food. They associate it with like food banks. They associate them with homeless shelters and people who are houseless. They associate it with, soup kitchens. They associate it with after school programs and children. That's what I hear a lot. Or like transitional housing. I hear that a lot. So sometimes when you're doing a different kind of issue that doesn't involve those areas, it may take a little bit longer or may take more effort to convince people why it's important, because people may not understand that there's a need. People may not understand the needs of that population, especially if they haven't experienced it themselves. So the reason why I'm bringing up this one is because if it's going to take longer for you to get public support for something, that may be a signal that you start with the thing that people can recognize the most, or you start with the thing that people can really gravitate to, or you pick the thing, like if you have a list of things you want to do, pick the thing that a lot of people can get behind and support. Why am I saying do this? Because you want to be able to scale up. You want to be sustainable. You want to keep running. Well, you want to pick something that people are willing to support and that it's an easier ask for you to do. So then you can get your stability to eventually go after the things that may be harder or take longer to convince people to get behind. I hope I'm making sense. So I'm not saying abandon all of your program ideas, especially if you have a long list, but I'm saying scale it. Think about how you want to scale. Be strategic. Don't do everything at once, but think about, okay, where is the public will? What do people already know about? Or what have they already supported? Or what have they signaled that they want to support in this particular area? And it may make a lot of sense for you to focus on that and designing what your first program will be. Picking your program is really important, but how you message it and how you communicate is just as important. So you could be doing fabulous work, but if you don't know how to message it, or you don't know how to package it in a way that persuades people to support you or to get behind you, then it may be hard for you to get funding, or it may take longer for your program to take off. So as much energy as you're putting into figuring out your programming and how you want to design that, think about how you're going to communicate that to people so that you can get their support. Because if people don't understand what you're doing, then they're not going to support. If people are confused by what they see, then their first reaction isn't to be like, oh, let me give you money so I can understand better. Their first reaction is going to be, I don't know what this is, and I'm not sure if this is something I want to support. I don't even know. So let me give it a little bit more time. So focusing on communication and having clarity about what you do and who you are is really important, and investing in marketing activities, visibility activities, so people see what you do and can recognize what you do. The last piece that I'll say to add on to this is that you're going to overwhelm yourself if you have a list of 10 programs and you're super new. And I know a lot of people, this is going to be hard for you to accept, and I get it, but you cannot do 10 programs at once. You just can't. And you may be like, Tiffany, I'm a Superman or a Superwoman, or I'm a super person, and I don't care. I am. I'm just giving you a piece of advice from what I've seen from working with hundreds and hundreds of founders. I've been doing this since 2016. Start with 1 or 2 signature programs and get your footing first before you try to change the entire world. Figure out what you do best in one or two areas using the criteria that I talked about in this video and go from there. Get your footing, get stability there, and then with your board, figure out strategically how you want to grow and which directions you want to grow. And the thing is, when you're super new, you're making a lot of assumptions about what will work or what won't work. So you also want to give it time to figure out if this is even the area you want to focus on. So when you're doing everything at once, you're not giving yourself time to breathe, to assess, to reflect. So pick one or two areas first, or one or two programs first, and then go from there. All right, so did I step on anybody's toes in this video? If so, let me know in the chat. Also, provide any advice that you have for startup founders. If you need help with your nonprofit, you can visit me at bossonabudget.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.